Hello and welcome to another episode of Off the Ruck. You're with me, John Ferguson, and today I'm joined by the lovely mate that I have at Scrumbags, Lachie. Lachie, thank you so much for coming back. We're going to do a wrap on this Game 3 series. Not winner, but definitely won back some hearts and minds of Australian rugby fans, and I think some global rugby fans as well after that win, which I'm very happy about, an Australian supporter. You've got the hat on, I've got the jersey on. Lachie, how are you feeling 2 days after the win? Because we are recording this on Monday morning.
Virgo, mate, I'm absolutely shattered. I've had the wonderful privilege of being able to travel around for the full tour, but mate, a night in my own bed is wonderful. I have now had time to sort of rest and reflect on what's been an incredible 6 weeks in total, if you include that Argentina game. And just to cap it off, making sure that the British and Irish Lions didn't go home with a full clean sweep as well. You've got to rep the jersey to say congrats, but what a wonderful game. I know you were there in the crowd. Give me a sense of what the occasion, the atmosphere was like at a core.
Yeah, I tell you what, apart from the fact that we got monsoonal rain for spurts there on the way into the stadium, it was just absolutely incredible. The voice and the singing of the Lions fans mixed with the quiet confidence and joy that the Australian fans got as the game was underway. It just all kind of crescendoed. And there were moments there where there could have been times where energy dipped, like when James Ryan got injured, but thankfully he looks kind of okay now. He was up and walking around after the game, and also the lightning strike. But everyone kind of just bought into the festival energy, and whether it was drinking beers or whether it was singing along or meeting other people in and around the ground, it was just so awesome to see that people were truly getting around the tour mentality, and the energy in the stadium was magnificent, as was the effort put in by RA. So I think it just goes to show that when they put some more energy and some more time into the 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 stadium area outside the stadium where people were drinking and there were merchandise shops and lots of pubs were showing games beforehand, and it was just they get in what they put out. And I think that you've just got to really buy into that. The day and the occasion is bigger than just the 80 minutes on the pitch, but it was tremendous and it looked awesome from the media boxes as well, where you were up in. So tremendous occasion, and I think that it was the way that the series needed to end for the Wallabies. Definitely, obviously the Lions would have preferred a different outcome, but it was just, yeah, it's been an exhausting 6 weeks, as you said. We've both been covering it in different ways, and it's been awesome, and I just am so happy. I took myself to a pub after that whole thing and just had a beer and just enjoyed the win, but enjoyed the moment. And it was just like, this is not happening again for another 12 years, because I can tell you what, the commercial success, the success on the field now retrospectively of the tour, that'll guarantee that it's coming back in 12 years, because it was just absolutely amazing to see that the Wallabies can put on such a good show and that RA can put on such a good festival.
Oh, there was never any doubt that the tour would not return to Australia. It's been farcical to hear some of the commentary around it. And yes, it generates clicks and headlines, which is fantastic. But this is easily the most commercially successful tour in Lions history. They've had just under a 5.5 million reached on an Australian television audience through free to air alone. The numbers are honestly mind-boggling, Fergo. You throw in the fact that they just had just under 500,000 attend live. It was over 500,000 people if you include the Dublin game against Argentina as well. So, I mean, the amount of banknotes rolling into RA's coffers to the Lions coffers, there's no doubt that they'll be back. And, it is lovely. I think it took a little bit of a sting and a bit of the tension out of it, the fact that they're already up 2-0. I'm sure we're going to get into, the intensity and how the game actually played out itself. But, what a wonderful result for the game, for the Australian fans in particular, that went through lightning delays, that went through all kinds of carnage in that game, plus the monsoonal rain you mentioned, to come up with what is arguably their most important win since the 2015 TRC decider. I think it was just remarkable to see the boys in gold produce a performance like that.
Yeah, no, it was absolutely a vital and crucial win. And we're going to get into the actual game now. So let's do that. But what I want to talk about first is give this some proper perspective, give this game some proper perspective, and wider series some proper perspective. Because I don't want to sugarcoat anything. I don't want to give false hopes. I don't want to be kind of just overly optimistic about the win. Let's be honest about it. So let's talk about the truths of the win. So first of all, we'll start before the game and work our way into the game. So the Wallabies were heavily hit by injury. By no means was this the best 23 that we could have put on the park had everyone been fit. And I think that needs to be highlighted. And it needs to be said because we lost our two favorite hookers, so that really in fact impacted our line out ball, which we saw straight away with Pollard's first wonky throw. We lost one of the most damaging ball runners in world rugby with Rob Valentini. And then also we had to make like a shuffle in the back line with like losing Potter. And that's a shuffle that Schmidt didn't want to make. And that's just all that combined and losing Alan Alatoa, bring in Taniela Tupou out of the cold. And then everyone was thinking he's not going to perform. This is a dud call, etc. That all of that put together really puts the effort and the performance that the Wallabies put together on the field in perspective. And we should be so proud of that. And, we'll bring all these points together once we've covered them, and we'll just cover them in isolation. Those changes alone for the Wallabies shows how important this win was for them and how much ticker they showed to get the win.
Oh, massive changes. What's that? 3 or 4 in the starting pack alone. Changes the dynamic of the bench and again of the line out as well. We saw Nick Frost taking on so much responsibility at the MCG in that second test, and he did well as a primary option. And just some teething issues there with Billy Pollard, coming into the fold. But I thought some of those players that did come in at late notice to step up, Taniela, and in particular Tom Hooper. I mean, but those two just played the house down. It was a best on ground performance from Big Hoops. I'm sure we'll get into him a bit later on, but to see the energy and the vigor with which they launched themselves into a rainy test match, they're almost the perfect pair to come in those kinds of conditions, which I think we'll talk about as well, Fergo. But those conditions were another great leveler.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's before we go to the weather, we'll just go touch on the Lions. The Lions having won the series the week before, I honestly think that they probably lost about 10% of mental edge. And that is a big percent. 10% is a lot. We often talk about the 1%ers. They're probably 10% off mentally. And Andy Farrell actually did make selection miscalculations here. He ran with virtually the same side. He should have rung the changes, made sure that a lot of boys were playing their first ever test match, and they would have given their 100% all. But I am not going to sugarcoat that. The Lions, had that been a decider, would have gotten up for that game a lot more, and they would have been in that fight a lot more. I'm not saying that they conceded on the day because that was the biggest winning margin, but that doesn't just happen in 1 week when we lose 4 players. So I think the Lions were 10% off mentally. We pumped them physically, and that's what happened. But that 10% mentality is a big, big, uh, big percentage at the top end. So I think that we have to be honest about that. And the Lions were not on their game on that night.
Yeah, I agree. And it's a testament to how good they were, even mentally being off, having already celebrated a series win quite heavily, which we understand they did across both Melbourne and Bondi for a couple of days, running some kegs dry. The fact that they were still in it until Ronan Kelleher went off with a yellow card with 11 minutes to play is scary stuff. Like they really could have taken that contest, and there was a deep sense. I don't know about where you were in the stadium, but particularly on the concourse where I was sort of roaming around for a bit, there was still so much tension with about 15 minutes to play and thinking,
Absolutely.
oh my God, the Lions still have the capacity to do that. And that's without, their primary second row options in. I thought James Ryan coming in was a strange selection. As probably the worst performing, even though it's a very high bar, the worst performing Lions lock. And you're right, to not have Van der Fleer or Pollock injected into the game to add spice, to add vigor, I think that really hurt them. And so too out wide, I thought there might have been an opportunity for a Duhan van der Merwe to come and change conditions. Could you have started Owen Farrell and had more of a poised, balanced approach in that back line, given you already had the not a miscalculation, but the unusual combinations brought about by Gary Ringrose's injury and Sione Tuipulotu's injury. There's so much that could have been done, but I think you're right, it didn't have to be done. The series is already run, and despite the fact that Farrell and Mara Toje and the team would have loved a 3-0 sweep, it would have been incredible, historic. They could have had a genuine claim to being one of the great
Mm.
Lions teams. I think this game actually proved that they're not one of the great Lions teams. They're just a very good one.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that clean clean sweep would have it is very much like a 50-50 call. Like had they clean sweeped it, they would have been such a great side. Now that they haven't, let's be honest as well. The Wallabies are sixth in the world, and we
Mm.
probably should be seventh or eighth, depending on other results going other ways. So, like, it's not just our wins that propelled us forward, it's other teams losing. So that is that we'll get to that as well when we preview what's going to happen into the TRC at the end of the episode. But also, like, I think that puts it into perspective at where this level of game was. It was a tremendous game, but let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. And also, let's be truthful about where the Lions fell short, but also the fact that the Wallabies had to pick themselves up and they were desperate. And that creates some ambiguity about where we actually sit. So we will get into that a little bit later. I thought that the weather was a huge leveler, as you mentioned, and particularly because of how we were playing. Any point that you could see us heavily on attack, you could throw a blanket over 13 of our 15 players. We were so direct. And if that was dry, the Lions players are getting off the deck and off their defensive line a lot quicker. It is very hard to accelerate at full force in a rush defense when you're literally having to dig deeper into the dirt because it was so wet. Like it was monsoonal. It was almost puddles. If that was Allianz, they would have been knee deep in water. That would have been just and it would have been a pool party. It would have been crazy. But I think those things played into the Wallabies' favor as well as the Lightning intermission. We have to be honest about this as well and be truthful and say that they probably got, and Joe Schmidt admitted as much. He said maybe 5 minutes more out of Talion Tupou and Skelton because of that. I think it's probably closer to 10, if I'm honest. They played till about the 60th minute, and Will Skelton, the Wallabies haven't been losing. They haven't been losing. They haven't been down whilst Will Skelton has been on the field. And I think if you get 60 minutes out of Will Skelton last week, we're probably in that a lot further. And we're going to get into the key Wallabies in a second, but the weather actually allowed Tupou and Skelton to bring their size and their, although they both are very explosive, their kind of slowest lumbering speed and power into the game. And we have to be honest that having those big men on the field with the intermission gave the Wallabies that opportunity to give them a bigger rest, to be able to say, hey, mate, you've only got 18 minutes left to play as opposed to 20. I know it might sound like a little bit of a nothingness, but when you're a big man carting around more than 135 kilograms, I think it matters. So it's just that having those players on the intermission, that all played into the Wallabies' favor. The weather, intermission, everything really did favor the big pack that the Wallabies had. What do you reckon about that?
I agreed. And to not to labor the cliche, but it was the perfect storm for Australia, right? You had a chance to put the queue in the rack for a little bit, recharge, and
Mm,
you're right. I'm going to say they probably got an extra 15 out of 10 hours, to be
mm,
honest. I can't remember the last time he played an hour's worth of test match rugby, but play he did. He was phenomenal. I'm not sure if you want to start talking players now, but he was
let's
putting up
do it.
numbers that we haven't seen in a test match for a very long time. Post contact meterage was huge. He was in the top three for the Wallabies going through there. Still so strong at the scrum as well. Wow. I mean, to have that extra charge in the legs too really helped. And I thought the fact that we also got an hour out of James Slipper, and then you've got the luxury of bringing on Angus Bell for a final quarter, that was so impactful too. So particularly seeing those big guys charge. But the main man we've got to talk about, right? Well, there's two of them. There's Will Skelton, who was just simply brutal, horrible, menacing in the best way we've seen from an Australian forward in a very long time. I'd argue that his off-ball contribution was actually bigger than on the ball. His ability to shit stir and get the worst out of the British and Lions pack and spark scuffle after scuffle. And you combine that with Tom Hooper's incredible work rate, top the carries with 18, top the post-contact meterage as well for the forwards, made a huge amount of tackles and a couple of turnovers. He was a very deserving best on ground. Those were the forwards that caught my eye. What did you like about them, or who else impressed you?
Yeah, no, I think your point around Will Skelton, I'm going to do an analysis video on him later in the week to just highlight what he does and why he does things and how big those ramifications are for the little details. And I think that Will Skelton, when he was younger, like most big players, they play with their size. But Will Skelton is a smart IQ rugby player, and he is just picking the little battles that matter later on down the line. It could be a phase later, it could be two phases later, but he is causing ripple effects with the things that he is doing at the defensive ruck, at the offensive ruck, in the carry. And I think that the Wallabies often say that, not the Wallabies only, but a lot of people say that having him in the pack actually changes your line out dynamic. But I think we've seen in this game what back row and what the broader pack needs to look like if you're going to be running with him. And I think having Tom Hooper at 6, which we'll get into a second, get to him as a player and his performance, really, really mattered. And I think that is going to be food for thought for Joe Schmidt moving on. We'll get to future selections later on in the video, but as you said, post contact meters, Skelton winning those ones. That is probably due to the weather. On a drier track, you probably get more out of the other back row players, but on a wetter track, when the contacts are so blunt and so direct, he's going to win that battle 9 times out of 10 purely just by falling over because he's such a big, tall man. So clearly such an impressive athlete. Then we move on to Tupou. The scrummaging was elite. And the energy that he showed and the vigor that he had, that I'm going to credit the First Nations and Pacifica coaching team and that experience for that performance. Was in a happy place. You could see him crying during the national anthem because he knows how much that jersey means to himself and to others, and that he probably is admitting to himself that, like, this is where I want to be and this is where I can be. And it's probably just a big whirlwind of emotions that's going through that man's head as he prepares to head off to Racing 92 in France at the end of the year. So, such a strong performance that he was good because he nailed the things that he needed to nail. Ball carried like a man of his size. He scrummed like a man with his power. And he showed the amount of energy that's expected of a test front row forward. So he just ticked all the boxes. And I think that both Skelton and Tupou have had their massive detractors. And I just hope that, yes, we don't want to rely on potential at the test level, but this is why we've continued to select them because we're waiting for performances like this. And now that the bar's been set, we just hope that it remains whenever they're in the gold jersey. Next player I want to talk about is Tom Hooper on the flank. So impressive, both at the line out and in the scrum. And he's always been a little bit of a grizzly, rough and tumble kind of player, but it's his confrontational nature, which has grown this year, and he's backed it up in the Super Rugby Pacific and then into Test. That has really made him such an impressive player. And that's what got him the steals at the breakdown. That's what got him with the steals, the line out. That's what made him such an impactful player. But that extra height at the line out and his work rate is what got him there. Because from memory, and I'm just going to double check now, he was the top carrier. He was top carrier by a long shot, 18 carries. Harry Wilson, 11 carries. Len Ikitau, 11 carries. We'll get into those players later, but that is a huge shift. And I'm not even sure that Rob Valentini hits those figures in any of his games necessarily. He's a great ball runner, but you can see that he had a mindset to be that guy.
And he was that guy. It's important before we get into his carries that we talk about that lineup because while he was not an attacking target, his ability to disrupt was phenomenal. They leaned so much on Frosty. They used Skelton in attack just standing, which I thought was a great tactic. It's hard to get in front of those shoulders, especially at the front. But Hooper was a massive part of those 5 line-out turnovers. I think he had a hand in 3 of them. He's just a pest. We saw it all through Super Rugby Pacific. The versatility to play from second row all the way through to number 8 in any of those positions is key. But I really think blindside is his go. He's such a great rough and tumble player. Australians are obsessed with trying to find the next sort of Matt Cobain or Scott Fardy, but I think we've got one pre-made in Tom Hooper right there. It's that raw bone talent that we have to put down to Eddie Jones spotting and trying to nurture in his 2023 seasons. Tom Hooper's rise has probably been one of the bright sparks out of the Jonestown saga. And to see him come through, get his first start in the Lions game and go best on ground, I'm super stoked for him. He was the difference along with Skelly and with Taniela in that pack.
Yeah, they were great. And they were backed up by another man who was our main line out target, which was Nick Frost. And I think that Frost's performance particularly defensively, I thought that he really stepped up and really brought some of that mongrel into his contacts. And that is something that he's been working on for ages. We've seen him. He's an athletic, fast, off on the ground lock, very tall, but we've just needed to see a little bit more from him in defense, a bit of starch, and he really brought that. But his line out work, and if we get him up quick enough, he is almost unbeatable. He is so good in the air and he's so tall, and he really is the tallest timber that we have in this Wallabies squad. And we need to be able to use him to be able to get those balls to him. There were some missed calls at line out time, like throwing to the back in the wet. Like, just stick Frost at the front and let him just win the ball. Like, it's just they overcomplicate it at times, and that's actually got to do with like the experience that someone like Dave Parecki would have brought. But I'm not blaming Billy Pollard or Brandon Payne-Amosa. I'm just saying that that actually comes from the line out caller, and that's probably where we get that balance a little bit wrong that we're still trying to work out. It worked out okay. Well done, Nick Frost. Two wingers, and I'm saying this genuinely. Max Jorgensen is the superstar of this Wallabies team. He's flown under the radar. He's been allowed to sink into the background because of the arrival of Joseph Akuso Suaalii. But I tell you what, Max Jorgensen is a huge reason why we won those games. Won that game, sorry, and won those moments throughout all the test matches. He is a genuine X-Factor game changer. And I'm so happy that he is playing so well, and he's come straight back in from his Super Rugby form straight into Test Rugby, and he's been able to transfer it at the age of 20. He is a freak.
He is. And we knew it. We just forgot a little bit when he was away, right? Yeah, we saw how good he was up until he got injured at the Cape Tin during Super Rugby for the Waratahs. But to come back, have the performance that he did at the Suncorp Stadium and build through the series to culminate in running for just under 100 metres, 70 post contact, 4 tackle busts, 3 line breaks. He owned the stage. He was simply phenomenal. And you're right, so much attention on Joseph Akuso Suaalii, and rightly so, as the high profile transfer over the past 6 months. But far out, Fergo. Jorgo is a bona fide Australian superstar, and now we've got to keep him in the game, right? He's up contract at the end of, I think, 2026.
2026,
So
yeah.
this is a man that needs to be locked down by Australian rugby, because rival codes, rival competitions will be circling, and based on this series performance, and in particular this game, you've just got to keep him.
No, absolutely. We have to lock him down because that wing spot is now his. We are debating the other wing spot. And on the other wing, Dylan Peitsch, that was the right game, that was the right conditions, and he was the right winger to pick in that moment. And he is another one. You want to be picking informed players, which has been a big debate about the Wallaby selection throughout this. And that's why I think that a lot of Wallaby supporters, for the first time, actually got their back up a little bit about Joe Schmidt, because the selections and the way he was talking about selections just wasn't quite making sense to a lot of people. And I think that particularly refers to the likes of Dylan Peitsch and also Lukan Salakaia-Loto, which we still haven't seen anything of yet. Which we may see for the TRC, but that remains to be seen. Squad will be announced, I think, Thursdays when they're announcing the squad. So we'll be getting into that a little bit later in the week, which is super exciting. But that has been frustrating. But to see Peitsch transfer his form on the 28th of June to the 2nd of August, did not miss a beat. That is a testament to how much he cared about playing in that match and how much he's done in the background whilst not being in the match day 23 to be able to get himself up for this game and to get to the right level. And his physicality on the wing and his staunchness in the tackle is what makes that Wallaby defense work. He gets that massive shot on Tommy Freeman, but then Fraser McGrath to be able to get over the ball and pilfer it. That is a clutch moment, just like his try was in the corner, which I was so happy for him to get in the jersey that he designed in Sydney in front of friends and family. What a moment. But give me your thoughts on Peitsch, because in the lieu of Harry Potter, who was absolutely worth the first starts because of his form in Super Rugby, and obviously Dylan Peitsch nursing a little bit of an injury in Super Rugby Pacific, that was absolutely vintage from Peitsch.
It was, and the stars aligned for him, right? So much is put down to, Suaalii creating space, drawing 2 for that opening try, but it was a shocking pass from Joe, and the fact that Peitschy was able to reef it in from half a meter behind him and then still finish in the corner under pressure. He is a perfect finishing winger. He's brutal. He's compact. Despite being a huge bloke, he's very dense and solid.
Mm.
So his ability to sort of bump off people and win those contacts, as evidenced by that huge hit on Freeman, he was up for this. It was perfect.
Mhm.
And I honestly thought, Fergo, that they'd consider him for the First Nations game just to get some extra game time under his feet, coming off the back of what I thought was a best on
Mm.
ground performance
And I'm sure he would have
against
loved
the
to have played in
Lions and
that
the
game as
Force.
a very proud Aboriginal man. Like he would have loved to play that. So a real shame, I think, for us who are supporting him and trying to grow that profile of the game. But as you say, as you're about, I feel like it's he was healthy for this game and he played well.
Yeah, and I wish, hindsight's 2020. I wish he could have been available for Game 2 in Melbourne.
Mm,
Losing Harry Potter so early, and while Tate McDermott did a sensational job as a scratch winger, Potter's form wasn't great in the first test. He was okay,
mm,
but if we had brought in Peitsch, what if? There are so many what ifs of this series, but I
absolutely.
feel that Peitsch and then the man that I would love to talk about now, and you mentioned earlier, what if Lukan Salakaia-Loto had
Mm,
featured in this, because I feel the only other player that could have added to the Wallabies pack in the same way that Skelton and Hooper did is the Big Goose himself. LSL was so good in that First Nations game, and having someone who was as physical, as abrasive, and someone who was able to win and contribute towards those little off ball battles, which
mm.
I think is another major reason why Australia won that game. I think Salakaia-Loto is the other what if of the series. But before we go into the backs, can we quickly talk about how disruptive the Wallabies were? And it feeds nicely into one of the backs to talk about. But that off ball battle and the scuffles and the little breakout biffs that were going on, it really rattled the
Mm,
lines. I don't think they were expecting that. And it's
mm.
something that Australia sort of I think surprised even their fans with the intensity of that performance and supporting their teammates.
Yeah, no, I think that um old mate, he summarized it perfectly. He said, yeah, we won't take no itshay. And
Poetry.
someone that I was like, he said that at halftime in an interview with Justin Harrison. Someone that I was speaking to who's not a typical Union fan said to me, "Oh, you can't see John Eales saying that," and I'm just like, that isn't a diss. Like that's the game's moved on from when John Eales was at the peak of his powers. We constantly talk about a rugby and well, not us, but people often talk about rugby as being a private schoolboy game. And it's just like, yeah, so but you're not a regular rugby union fan, and yet you're criticizing it for broadening out and breaking from this kind of, you know, um this this perception. It was just for me, that was a moment of absolute reflection of where this Wallaby squad is at, where like who the people in this Wallaby squad are. And Will Skelton, he didn't take a step back, but he was the kind of leader that the Wallabies needed to be able to say, hey, like this is our turf. You want to come here, you better get ready to get scrappy because we are going to bring it to you every single moment of the game. And I honestly do think that the Wallabies have been a little bit too nice in recent years. Like they haven't really taken umbrage with certain things on the field. And I'm not talking about Nic White being off it on the field. Like I'm talking about Pack standing up and being like, you know what, that shot wasn't okay. This wasn't okay. And just getting into the face of oppositions. And Will Skelton as a leader, I'm not saying he has to be captain. I'm just saying as a leader, that gave the people on the field as well as the crowd, as you mentioned, the ability to say, hey, this is our turf. We actually are in this contest. Let's give it a hot crack.
Oh, 100% agree. And you mentioned him before, but the bloke giving the biggest crack of all, the outgoing Nic White. We'll talk about him in the backs now, but what a performance from the Lorax to come out there off guns akimbo, having the best time of his life in a swan song. He was phenomenal, getting up in everyone's face. His off-ball antics were superb, helped change momentum. But honestly, it was his performance on the ball that was terrific. His service was slick. His clearance from the base. Everyone's talked about Jake Gordon's ability to get an extra meter or two, but Nic White's
Mm.
kicking is probably the strongest of the three Wallabies halfbacks in contention. And I think he played a really key role in laying this game on a platter, not just for not for Tom Liner in the first half, before he went off with a very suspicious HIA and clean out that's since been cited. But also, well, White's combination with Donaldson early in the second half really helped ease Dono transition into the biggest game of his career. And I think Whitey had a terrific performance in what looks to be his international swan song.
Yeah, I mean, again, that has perhaps been already put on ice before it even happens because Jake Gordon, as we know, tweaks hammy in training very late in training on Thursday. He wasn't. It's one of those things where you pull the trigger and bring in like Ryan Lonergan and just kind of continue with the evolution. But then you're going to have Ryan Lonergan and Tate McDermott, both relatively inexperienced if you compare them to White and Gordon. Not saying that they're inexperienced full stop, just relatively. And then also Ryan Lonergan, you don't want to be putting a guy like Tom Liner if he gets selected with Ryan Lonergan, who both have like less than 10 caps put together, play at Ellis Park or something. Like it's just it just
Yeah.
feels like the wrong thing to do for them and for the team. Ryan Lonergan, start him against Argentina. He's ready for test match rugby. It's not that. It's just against the world champs in their backyard. It just feels like an unfair thing to do. So to keep Nic White is perhaps a good thing in the scrum, whether in the squad, whether he plays, who knows? But he's still very much part of the equation. I'm glad you brought that up. So, Lachie, now that we've watched the game, we've watched the series, it's very much we're thankful. We're thankful that the series is now over from a work perspective. But I tell you what, for Joe Schmidt and for the Wallabies, their work is only just begun. And they fly to South Africa on Friday, I believe. So in 4 days' time from recording this, and they're gonna have to announce a squad, like we said on Thursday, before they fly out. So a lot of intrigues is just gonna ramp up after 24 hours after this comes out. So let's talk about what are the selection truths moving forward. I can't see that the squad is going to be looking too different, but I do think there are some selection truths that we have to talk through for then to be able to have a genuine talk about what the TRC, what the prospects of us doing well in the TSC looks like. So I think we'll start with the backs and then we'll move into the forwards just because we've been very forward dominated because let's be honest, that's who won us that game in Sydney for game 3. So for the backs, what are you seeing? What are you liking? What are the selection truths? Will we see something different?
We'll start with the big elephant in the room. And I think that remains what do we do with Joseph Akusa-Suaalii? Again, he had a solid, if unspectacular, performance in this game. I think the rain, which was a leveler for all, made his defense easier because it was harder to get the ball out to his channel when he's on the back foot defending. So he didn't have nearly as much pressure as those first 2 tests. It remains to be seen for me whether he is Australia's long-term 13. I hope he proves me wrong and can turn it around because they seem to be set on that combination with Ikitau. But from the series, it's very clear that Len Ikitau can play either 12 or 13 for Australia. He is that good. He will be a linchpin in that backline for as long as he wants to be. Suaalii is still a question mark for me. So I think the truth, if we're going to get to that, is that Joseph Akusa-Suaalii is currently not test quality 13, but I believe that Joe Schmidt will try to persist with him regardless, and maybe that's for the best. I'm very eager for your take on this because I know that you've got some thoughts about Suaalii's form and suitability for the midfield. I find it difficult to see a world in which the Wallabies use Suaalii as an impact player, but I'm starting to think that that might be the best use for Joseph Akusa-Suaalii coming on in the 23 jersey, filling in anywhere from the midfield on the wing on the fullback and adding that sort of Sonny Bill X factor that worked so well for New Zealand in their glory days between 2011 and 2015. I think there's probably too much money on the table for that to be the case, to be honest, Fergo. So it's a tough one, but I think that they will give him time and he will face no harder examination in his early rugby career than Jesse Creel and Damien de Allende for 2 tests in South Africa. I think it's going to get harder before we get easier for Suaalii at 13.
No, I agree. I couldn't find the Optus stats. If you guys see them out there, post them in the comments below. It was that Lenny Gitau has been the most defenders throughout the series, and I was just thought that was mind-boggling. I think it was.
Yep.
I think it went. I think it might have been him or Tom Wright that was first. And then it went down to Jorgo, and I think Jake Gordon was like the top four of the top five. Four of the top five were Australians, and then Finn Russell was the top Lion. It was just crazy. And so I think that actually changed my mind a little bit about how well he's doing at 12. I just think that because he's so good at getting in between two players and using his left foot step, he isn't afforded that space at 12 as he is at 13. But seeing those stats, I was like, wow, like, well, he's doing such a good job that, like, yeah, of course, we're not seeing him in the 13 jersey, but, would we be seeing those numbers out of someone that you mentioned, like a Hunter Paisami? So it was just one of those things where I was thinking, okay, well, it's not too bad. But what I will say, it's not so much on the offensive side of the ball. I don't think we're getting the most out of Joseph Akuso Suaalii, and I think that again he's gonna find it hard to find that space at 13 again because the Springboks run one of the fastest rush defenses in the world. So he's not going to get any respite on that aspect coming into the British from the British and Irish Lions series straight into the Springboks 2-game series there as part of the Rugby Championship. But in attack, he is a very solid and big player, but he is not going to be physically dominant against a Damien Diolende and Jesse Creel. And I just think that the biggest concern for me is defense. And I'd actually rather put him like if you're gonna have him attack at 13, fine. But please put him defensively at 12. Because Len Ikitau runs that 13 channel so well. He's such a defensive genius when it comes to it. Apparently he doesn't talk a lot, but he says a lot with his body language, and he's shaping out, and he runs the pattern so well, and has done it with Laurie Fisher at the Brumbies for years. Now doing it with the Wallabies because Laurie Fisher's their defensive coach, running the same connected line speed. He knows that system inside out. So I think that whatever you do, I just don't know if we can put Suaalii at 13 defensively. Have him at 12, allow him to make some flush tackles, allow him to hit Damien Diolende as he wants to. But he's been turned inside out too many times. And as you mentioned, the weather was so beneficial for him because without that, he probably gets exposed a couple of more times. And he did defend better. Like he looked optically, he looked like he kind of held his feet and shape a little bit better. But the weather was a big contributor to that. And so I am still I'm of the thought that he should be in the 23 jersey for South Africa. I still think that Hunter Paisami and Lenny Kitau is a better center combination to go into that game, particularly if you're playing Tom Liner at 10. You need someone that he knows inside and out. And whether it's Tate McDermott in the second half and then Hunter Paisami during the first half, it's just about changing it. And we are also, I mean, I think that's the center combination. I think we've talked about the backs that we've been impressed with. I think a Peitsch. I'm not sure if a Peitsch is the right player. Maybe a Corey Toole up against the speedsters of Kurtley Arunsa and Cheslin Colby for the Springboks is a better matchup as opposed to putting Peitsch, because I can see Peitsch he's not the top end speedster that Jorgensen, Potter, and Poole are. So maybe that's a better selection to have just for that first game to see what it is. Not that he played badly, but it's just you got to see where that game is going to go. And I backed Colby and Kurtley Arunsa against Peitsch in a one-on-one. Sorry, Peachy, but I mean, if you've got the ball, I reckon you're running over them maybe, but I don't think without the ball you're necessarily catching those whippets.
I don't know if too many people run over the top of Colby. We've seen him drop
Yeah.
Mara Itoje and go on their backside. But this is potentially, and this is a bit out of pocket, but maybe do you go, well, if we're going to have an aerial battle, why not put Suaalii on a Kurtley Arunsa and just give it a go? You're going in rank
Absolutely.
underdogs against the world champions, and if there's going to be one battle that Suaalii can win against those two, it's an aerial one. I doubt we'll see it, but it'd certainly be exciting to see someone of that height and skill set catch a couple of high balls sort of in goal around those two. That's one area that I don't think Colby and KLA can win. On almost every other metric, I think they'd have Joey sliced and diced. So we'll just have to wait to be seen. I think that's a good chunk of our backs truths. What did you want to get to in the forwards?
Before we go there, just one thing. The injury to Tom Liner and the lack of a genuine third option at 10, I think James O'Connor is the correct call to carry on through to the TRC. I'm not saying he's starting, but who the hell are you putting in that third jersey should Liner cop a concussion in game one? Because I think Liner should keep the 10 jersey. And I don't think Donaldson played poorly, but there was nothing in that performance which said that he should supersede Liner's selection in the 10 jersey. And I've been very impressed with like Liner was schooled, brought up in the UK format. He knows how to kick, he knows how to play territory, and he does those fundamental parts well as orchestrating the side. And I think that that is the biggest pick in his ledger, as opposed to a Donaldson, who's very much an instinctive ball player. So, but James O'Connor, I can't like. Who else do you bring in? Lawson Crichton. There's been some chat of Harry McLaughlin Phillips. Seems like insanity to me. And then you've got Tane Edmond, who hasn't even been playing for Eastwood. And so I just think that James O'Connor, having been part of the system and as a known finisher, if you lose a liner, start Donaldson, bring O'Connor off the bench. If you have the two young guns, let them play like Joe Schmidt during the series. But I think this also puts in perspective how much the loss of Lolosio has truly exposed our rawness at 10, because there's no other 10s that you realistically can bring into that space and be like, yeah, I'm comfortable with starting you.
Yeah, we don't have the luxury of a New Zealand or South Africa where your second playmaker is Damien McKenzie or a young upstart like Mani Labok, World Cup winners, regular trophy winners. It's crazy when you look at it, and I think maybe in some way though, Virgo, this is a good thing. We knew Noah Lolesio was heading abroad at the end of the year, if not sooner, to head over to Japan. And this just fast tracks it, right? It's an opportunity for Liner, for Donaldson, who I think are the two clear front runners to go. And I agree, James O'Connor remains there as the third, as that mature head, as that nurturing head. As for the next generation of tens coming up, I think that's probably an entire episode of itself. But you're right, you keep James O'Connor around those two, and if Liner's head injuries persist, or he should struggle at times throughout the TRC, Ben Donaldson goes in to run the cutter with JIC off the pine.
Yep. No, absolutely. And let's go to the forwards, because I think you're right. I think that we've seen that as a lot of people have been speaking about Jeremy Williams acquitting himself by his big impacts late in the game. So line out
Oh,
steal,
I thought he was good. Yes.
turnaround, like turnover. I thought he was really good. But that for me doesn't quit him of the fact that he is a Nick Frost replacement. He is not a Will Skelton replacement. Like you put him on in the 42nd minute there after the lightning strike, we are not getting the same result because Skelton was so big and so powerful. Lukan Salakaia-Loto, he's proved that he can be a worthy replacement, but that just goes to show it's like, so we either have Lukan on the bench and we replace Skelton with him, or we start Jeremy Williams and we and then we bring in a Lucan for Will Skelton, or we start Lucan with one of those two. I just can't. It's been proved to me that against the big nations, so I'm talking about the Lions pack, because they have the luxury of picking, the biggest and the toughest players from four nations. You start looking at teams like France, South Africa, New Zealand. We Against the other nations, we can get away with picking Jeremy Williams and Nick Frost because they are physical enough, they're big enough, they're tough enough, they've got the grunt. But against those top 3-4 sides, I don't think we can get away with having those two as a locking duo at any point throughout the game. Lucan and Will Skelton provide so much grunt, physicality, confrontation, and also their ability to really swim through and bust seams and mauls. So I think that for Jeremy Williams and Nick Frost, they are a great duo, but not together, unfortunately. I think that's my first truth that I'm seeing from the selection perspective moving into the TRC.
Yeah, I like it. And I think if I can build off that, it's not so much that they, from my perspective, don't go well together. It's that they are not suited to different packs. We need to be able to be flexible enough as an Australian unit to pick for the conditions and pick for the team. That we have four excellent locks is phenomenal. I don't think we've had that luxury for a little while now. But it, obviously remains to be seen how available Skelton is for future tests through the TRC, what he's doing after that. So much is tied up with the La Rochelle contract. So I think you're right. Lukan Salakaia-Loto has a massive role to play. And the truth is that he was arguably the best performing lock from Australia all tour. which is scary to think because he played what 4 games and 3 games rather and didn't get a test. He is the perfect like-for-like replacement. You can't exactly build another 140 kilo second rower, but yeah, at a $120 and with the same amount of aggro, Lukhan Salakaia-Loto is an excellent foil to come in for him. I think you're right. It lends itself to Jeremy Williams being probably at this point the 19 jersey. I'm
Mm,
not sure, what considerations will be made if Skelton's available, and could
mm,
Williams play as a 6 cover? We've
yep,
got lots of back row truths that we need to sort of turn up in a tick as well. But I'm fascinated to see
absolutely.
how he will be used for the rest of the series and heading into a big World Cup year in 27.
Absolutely. And I think that Jeremy Williams, it's just, he's so young. So is Nick Frost. They don't need to be that person right now. Selecting age profile is something that Australia needs to get right now. Will Skelton, Lukhan Salakaia-Loto, they are like more so Lukhan for this comment, but Lukhan is at the start of his absolute peak as a test level lock age wise and experience wise, and he'll admit that himself. And by not picking, you don't need to pick the 26-year-old for the 2027 World Cup. You need to pick the 26-year-old, 27-year-old, 28-year-old, 29-year-old, so that they're 32, 31, 30 from that World Cup with 50 caps under their belt. And if Lukon
Mhm.
gets that spot, he's well over 50 caps. I think he's at 30 now or something, 32 or something like that. So it's just about like, you don't need to pick the fresh faced kid right now. We're not building towards the World Cup with nothing. We have the foundation. Use those players because they are really reaching their peaks of their powers. And in the second row, oh, sorry, in the back row, as you said that we need to get to, honestly, and I hate to say this, but I think that we saw another piece of evidence again that Harry Wilson is not necessarily a bolted on starter. Carrying 11 times, again, getting lineouts pinched against him. And I'm not sure, maybe you can tell me what the post contact meters are like, but I'm just not seeing enough impact from him from being necessarily an absolute starter because I don't think his defensive work is necessarily the most aggressive nor complete of the back row selections that we have available either. So for me, that is still very much a question in my mind. I know that, like, obviously you're a Queensland supporter, but this is Wallabies thinking, so you're not going to be 100% biased. But what are your thoughts? Because he's tremendous for the Reds. And I think from a technical perspective, which I might get to after you've given me your initial thoughts, it's just not quite, it's not quite working.
It's such a hard thing to sort of break down because there is so much appeal and joy around the manner in which Harry Wilson captains. He's young, he
Absolutely.
wears his heart on the sleeve, tears, laughter, he rides every wave, and it's a wonderful thing to see. Uh, but is he Australia's best number 8? I think the evidence is no from this series. The impact that Rob Valetini had in a half um, showed what you can have at the back of the scrum. And while Harry Wilson, you mentioned he carried 11 times, he ran for about 37 meters, 19 of which was post contact. So his meterage was actually quite good. He was the highest carrying forward in the game. But you're right, when he hits the line, he doesn't have the same impact in tests that he does at Super Rugby. And we saw a couple of times, most notably off a goal line dropout, the big Harry Wilson run up, and he got absolutely folded. Yeah, he
Yeah.
did not make meters. He got tipped on his ass and spun around, which is a
And I love
testament
him
against the
coming off
Lions'
the back
defense.
fence.
Yeah,
Love him going hard, but as you say, didn't make meters.
no, he doesn't have the same sting as Bobby V. And I think that it's going to be a really hard conversation coming up for Wilso because I know that often, barring countries like South Africa that seem to break the mold successfully, you want your captain to be an 80-minute player who is the best on the ground.
Yep.
Um, I don't think that currently Harry Wilson is the best number 8, but with Valetini's calf issues and Gleeson heading abroad,
Yep.
I don't think we're going to see a change anytime soon.
Mm,
If we're honest, the best back row for mine, we had 2 from 3 against the Lions, and they were Tom Hooper and Fraser McWright.
yep.
So Wilson's got a huge fight on his hands. He's got the support of the playing group as a skipper, but
Mm,
as we know, there are no shortage of skippers in that Australian team. So
yeah.
Joe's very happy to chop and change.
Mm.
But mate, I think we're in for a very emotional roller coaster for Harry Wilson over the next 12 months or so, and a huge opportunity to stamp himself because he still can. We've seen that he can do it.
Absolutely.
He just
Yep.
needs to up it to test level.
Mm. Yeah, so I think it's interesting. I think the one thing that I'd say to the listeners and the watchers about Harry Wilson with his carry technique, he leans forward from the hips. If you watch Rob Valentini carry and even Rob Leota, they both like Rob Leota planes through contact. So he has his legs way further back from where he is and he launches through contact head first. And that makes it very hard for someone to get a dominant shot on such a big, long guy. And then the reason why I compare him is because then you've got Rob Valentini who leans sideways, chucks the hips into contact, and is also at like a almost like just a little bit bigger than 45-degree angles. And he makes himself a longer target, but it's at an angle that makes it hard to hit. Harry Wilson leans forward from the hips, which gives everyone a clean shot at his legs. And so we don't need to worry about his bent front part. It's just very easy to chop him because his legs aren't moving because he's not a very elusive runner. He's a very direct runner. And that's what allows him to get his torso through contact and get the offloads going. But if you get hit with a dominant shot, it's very hard to get that offload off, particularly if you get chopped effectively, which a lot of the lines like Tom Curry, Jack Morgan, Maro Toje, everyone chops very effectively. So that's where I think that running tech wise is why he's just it's too easy to study and too easy to say if Harry Wilson's running at you, chop him and he's not going elsewhere. Where it's so hard to do that with Rob Valentini or someone else because they are such powerful ball carriers, but their shape is very different. So I think that's something that people should look at and more so it's not so much that he's weaker or anything like that. It's just that sometimes tackle and carry tech don't marry up well. And I think that's where I'm seeing a lot of that come from. I think that you're right. Fraser McWright, very impressive in the back row. That fight with Carlo Tizzano, we're going to be moving on. I love that we're having that fight on our hands. At number 6, we'll see what happens with selection policy. We'll get there in a second. In the front row, hookers need to sort themselves out. We need to be able to get an established hooking pair in there because I thought that Preki was good. Not too much to say about Brandon Paenga-Amosa. He stepped in well. I didn't notice anything bad about him, but Matt Fessler and Dave Parecki really do need to be able to solidify that because I think that having them fight for contention with Billy Pollard is only going to bring the best out of them. And then I think in the front row, if I'm honest, starting James Slipper ahead of Angus Bell has been one of the best selection calls that Joe Schmidt has made. And he has proved that he's wound back the years and his scrummaging has been so integral. While Daniel Tupou on the weekend was working over whoever he was up against, whether it was Ellis Gandra, whether it was Andrew Porter, and getting those penalties. James Slipper was driving straight and keeping his side up. And he is just in such immaculate form for the old man. And I love watching him doing what he's doing.
He's the unsung hero of this test series, I think, for Australia. He just quietly, as he always does, he has for the past, 13, 14 years professionally, just went about it, no fuss. We could sing his praises all day, Slips, but he probably wouldn't want you to. Another impressive performance. And, he's, again, another Brumbies contract for 2026. He keeps hinting at retirement. I have no idea when he'll pull the trigger, but I dare say we'll see him on the plane to South Africa, and you'll need every ounce of his experience up against the two-time world champs.
Mm. No, we will definitely need that. And it'll be interesting to see when Bell's heading over to Ulster later in the year. It's going to be interesting to see how that what that dynamic looks like at loose head prop because we do have some people who can come up. Loose head prop's actually better stocked than tight head prop, so it'll be interesting to see there. Let's have a quick chat about selection policy for the TRC. We are still waiting on key crucial conversations who have happened maybe yesterday, Sunday, with Will Skelton, with Joe Schmidt. Daniel Tupou heading to Racing, Gleeson heading over to Montpellier, I believe. Tom Hooper heading to Exeter Chiefs in the UK, and obviously Will Skelton, who's contracted with La Rochelle. These are key players. These are the players that we need in our match day 23, if not starting 15. This is a headache and a half to be able to work out who's available, when they're going to be coming. What's your view on this? Because if you're RA, you're throwing dollars at all these players and making sure that they actually live up to whenever their contracts are supposedly running out for that, and obviously sticking around in the Reg 9 window.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think there are kind of two tiers here. It's the people that meet the, very flexible, unofficial ghetto law threshold of test matches
Yep.
played. How far do we move the hoop whenever we need to? So I think for players like Taniela, who's heading off, um, he'll still come for the TRC. He's got the credit in the bank for test matches played. And I dare say we'll see him go through the whole tournament because Alan Alatoa is a huge loss, and tight
Massive,
head remains
massive.
remains an interesting area. I know you mentioned that it's a bit more stocked than the loose heads, but I tend to say that they're both pretty thin at best at the moment.
Yep.
So Nella will stick around. Will Skelton is the least likely, in my opinion, to make that TRC side, only because of the tight-knit nature of the French contracting.
Yeah.
Ronan O'Gara was singing his praises, heavily saying he's the best player he's ever picked and selected and the best coaching decision he's ever made.
Yep.
He'll back for La Rochelle to get back to the top of European rugby. Gleeson and Hooper are the really interesting ones for me. I think the easiest to let go for the series for TRC will be Gleeson. Not
Yep.
because he's played badly, but because you have Pete Samu waiting in the wings, a world-class back rower who can cover 6, 7, and 8 far better than Gleeson can.
Mm.
So for me, I think Gleeson is also likely to be beyond a surplus to requirements, shall we say, for the
Yep.
TRC. What they do with Tom Hooper is going to be fascinating though, because he is that really versatile person that can come in either as your 6 or as your 19.
Mm.
And I think they'll probably take Tom Hooper because of how crucial he will be at the defensive line out in South Africa. And also, we've seen how well he can perform against New Zealand. It brings out the best of him, the country boy having a crack at the Kiwis. So I
Yep.
think that they'll take Tupou and Hooper, and Skelton
Mm.
and Gleeson will be off to France. That's my hunch, mate. How do you say it?
Yeah, I think that the only caveat that I'd say to that is what the prognosis and health of Rob Valentini is like. If
Mm,
his calf is worse for wear and they don't want to push him for that first test, you put Gleason in that side. I mean
I
that's
agree.
conversations and that's things that you need to monitor. That we're not privy to those conversations. I agree, Reece Skelton. How vital all of a sudden Lukang Salakai Loto becomes in this equation, and like let's talk about who's going to come in. Um, First man I'm calling if I'm Joe Schmidt on Monday morning if that conversation with Will Skelton didn't go the way that he was hoping. Lukang Salakai Loto comes straight in. I think that you probably start if you're not picking Gleason and you want to keep the squad the same size, you're probably looking at a Seru Uru coming in as well. Um, then front row, I think they've got their front row relatively sorted. Like, do you bring in another one? I'm unsure whether you need to at this stage. Maybe, and because an Adrian Ross is already part of that matrix. Maybe he stays. So I don't know that's coming in. You keep the hookers as they were when they started in the back line. Flipper Nangunu was obviously injured. To an extent in that FNP game. Then you've got the injury to Harry Potter. Do you need to bring in another winger? You have Fluke and Corey Toole in the wings. You probably don't need to. And then all of a sudden, do you try to bring in another center like a David Feluai? It's and obviously Ryan Lonergan, him straight in. I don't care if you have to carry 4 halfbacks. If Jake Gordon's a bit injured, you're bringing Ryan Lonergan in because now is the time for Ryan Lonergan. So I'm super excited by that. Is there anyone else that I haven't mentioned that you'd necessarily see being brought into the squad?
I don't think so. I think that there is a lot of interest from Joe Schmidt still on Charlie Cale. While we know he's a massive fan of him, we know Cale's on the sort of the track to return. I
He was
probably
also
think
on the
it's too
injured
soon
list
though.
when the squad was
Yeah,
initially announced. He was also along with Liam Wright, and I can't remember who else was on that list, but Liam Wright and Charlie Kay were definitely on that
yeah.
list. So yeah,
And
you're right to
Massimo
point it out.
DeLutis,
Massimo
the
list.
big fella from Queensland. All three very highly rated. I think Charlie Cale is the smoky to feature later in the year. I think in
Mm,
that back row, but where you fit him in is a mystery. I think it's
mm,
probably more of a battling for a bench spot. So I think you're right. It remains relatively unchanged. It's just those
mm,
selections around Skelton et al. And how they go.
mm.
But I think you were very astute in picking up Aiden Ross, and I think he will absolutely debut over in South Africa. It's in some capacity. Oh, during the TRC, yeah, a hell of a scrummager. I don't care what your opinions are around trans-Tasman pickups, frankly, because he's too
Yeah.
good to ignore
Oh,
in that
Trans
role. So
Tasman
fascinating
pickups,
to
mate.
see.
Sione Tuipulotu, Bundy Aki, Jamieson Gibson Park, Mac Hansen. Don't even get me started. We're selecting Aiden Ross. If he's got an Australian grandmother or whatever it is, we're picking him. He's class.
Gosford's finest
Now,
Wallaby, mate. He'll be good.
to wrap up this chat, we're going to have a quick 5 minute chat on the Wallaroos squad because
Mm.
we'll be doing a lot of that moving forward. But um, I also want to get a quick 30 seconds on the All Black squad for the TRC, which is just dropped. Wallaroos, they got a win against Wales after having lost on the weekend prior. If I was at the ground, North Sydney Oval, pouring rain. Well done to everyone who got out there. It was such a good political, dominant performance and the win. Well done. Uh, the support and the crowd, and I just loved the love that they showed for the Wallaroos. It was awesome to be there. It really was. If you've got this, I whip the screen, whip the squad up on the screen. Give me your first thoughts, Lockie, because this is so exciting. There is only places to go up for how the Wallaroos have been playing, and to where they're going to be going with Joe Yap for the starting game of the Women's Rugby World Cup.
Yeah, oh look, you've got the squad up in front of you now. No surprises from me. I think it's as solid and as settled as you can get. 17 returning from the delayed 2022 Rugby World Cup, which is really exciting. And it's the most experienced group of Wallaroos we've ever had. You know, we've got two with 40 caps now in Ash Masters and Trill Pomare. There are stacks of players all in the mid 30s, building really nicely. And, the players who are going to their first World Cup, well, they're players like Charlotte Caslick and Tia Hines, multiple Olympians who can perform under pressure and will have key roles going forward. I think the inclusion of Brianna Hoy is massive, coming in as loosehead prop cover. She's been really missed throughout the 2025 season, both for the Tars and for the Wallaroos. For mine, she's probably starting loosehead when fit. So really excited to see how she goes, getting back into it. The rise of Feliki Pahiva up front has been really impressive as well. She can play loose and tight head, which is super important, having that flexibility and that support around the pack, because historically the pack is where we have been dominated, particularly by the New Zealands and the Englands and the Frances of the world. So really excited for Pahiva to get a crack. And out wide, how exciting to see 17-year-old Waria Ellis get picked up. I think she's got 3 or 4 caps now, but she's going to a World Cup. Best feat in women's rugby, possibly world rugby, to be honest. The way that she moves is phenomenal. So I'm super excited for her. What were some of the other names that stood out to you in this squad?
I think you mentioned the key names. I think like from the performance in Wales and like in the Wales game at the weekend about like who you want to be carrying over into carry on the good form. I think that you can't go past anyone else but at number 9, Lane Morgan. Like it is just incredible at how her service, how game understanding changed the pace and the narrative of the Wallaroos game as a whole. I think she only played ended up being like 20 minutes or something, like almost less, but her delivery off the base and her urgency to get the ball out was notable on the ground, but you could see how that changed even the Wales defensive pattern moving forward. It is so crucial. And I think that it really is about, because at the ground, what you saw was that the amount of space that the Wallaroos can generate with the powerful ball runners like the Masters, like the Palus, like the even Fredericks in the midfield. It's just about how they can capitalize on creating momentum and capitalizing on the momentum. And Desiree Miller and Maya Stewart, they were in space like 90% of the time. And it's just about the likes of Maleka or whoever is playing at number 10 to really be able to play on the front foot and to be able to pick those moments. There was a lot of switching behind the ruck. So Desiree Miller and I think it was Holst was fullback. Is that correct? And is that my thinking? Yeah, they were switching around the back as well as Ellis, and often like swinging to kind of to expose space. But a lot of the swinging was done without getting the ball. And if someone's swinging, they need that ball when the swing is happening, not after it's happened, because otherwise the defense will have time to mirror. It was just one of those things that I thought Lane Morgan really picked up well and drove that. But I think that whoever's playing 10, whoever it may be, because I thought Maleka had a very good game and she copped a couple of late shots. They are going to have to work on really being able to capitalize on that, because I think that they actually have so much more in them, which excites me so much ahead of this World Cup campaign.
Yeah, I agree. And look, Landmorgan had a great impact off the pine. She played really well, I thought, in the first game too. But like Sammy Wood played herself onto the plane with that performance at halfback. Her goal kicking as well is going to be really exciting. They've only taken 2 recognised nines over there. Nat Wright, probably the most unlucky to miss out on the Wallaroos squad, just looking at it on the sort of position-based selection there. But look, breakout players out of the game who put their hand up. Piper Duck, what a performance. 80 minutes at 6, can cover 6, 7, 8, played so well. Big boo to Inakavadra, is a starting 8 in every game that she can be. Her go forward is phenomenal. And to have the versatility of someone like Trillian Pomare, who can slot in either midfield, who can come in off the bench, who can run the cutter if needed, her experience is going to be so important as well. So I'm really, really excited to be, we're all card-carrying members of the Roo crew here, Fergo. We're keen to see him get stuck into Samoa and what's the hell of a pool. Samoa's, no easy beats either, but then you go up against the USA in what is a must-win game to qualify, and then you've got hosts England, who will be stinging and, almost unbackable favourites to win a World Cup over there. So it's just going to be an incredible couple of months coming up with the Women's World Cup, and then, as we're going to get into a bit of TRC action.
Yeah, absolutely. We're on the off the rugby channel. We're going to be talking a lot of Wallaroos during the World Cup. So make sure to tune in if you are a Wallaroos fan, and if you're loving the girls' team, then make sure you stick around for that throughout the months ahead starting in August. A quick touch on the All Blacks squad, mate. This is more so just as a box ticking exercise, because obviously we've got a whole Sanzar TRC preview coming up. But I just saw that the squad dropped, and I think it'd be remiss of us not at least to be able to talk about it quickly. The big picks: Simon Parker, Kyle Preston, and Leroy Carter, the new caps, to be able to come to the side. Kyle Preston, the guy who scored a hat-trick on debut for the Crusaders this year, out of absolute nowhere. Like, what? Like, I don't even know what that selection really means, because who's not like necessarily on that plane? Finley Christie. That's insane. That is insane.
It's a
And then
hell of a pick. Jeez.
yeah, I know. It was like, although I'm not seeing Noah Hotham's made the squad, Cam Roygard and Cortez Ratama. Not seeing Preston on the actual team. So he's there as injury cover. Oh, Finley Christie's there as well. So they've gone with 5 halfbacks.
It's Chockers. Okay. It's a Chockers squad.
Yeah. Jesus. Oh, Tavatavanawa, he's in there. I can't wait to see him against the South Africans. Billy Proctor, well deserved. Fabian Holland, talk about a test-ready lock. Jesus Christ, the big man.
He was so good in that French series, Fergo. He was easily my New Zealand player, best player across those 3 games. I think he played every single minute as well. 3 80 minutes back to back to back to back. What a story! A Dutch fellow who wanted to come across and play for the All Blacks, and he just made it happen. It's pretty incredible rise. But mate, for me, having Simon Parker, what a bolt from the blue. He's had a bit of experience with the Chiefs now, and they're missing some players to injury, but he is far and away the biggest bolter for mine in that All Black squad. I'm terrified, as I usually am when a New Zealand player emerges of what he's capable of. But as far as injury cover is concerned, I would love to see Leroy Carter in an All Blacks jersey. He's produced some amazing highlights on the 7 season for the Chiefs. Yet another winger to add to the disgusting depth over the ditch.
It's such a deep squad. It's just ridiculous. Well done to Tavita Mafaleo for making it onto the injury cover list. Josh Lord, well done, son. George Bauer, obviously there as well. Tyra Lomax kind of still in doubt. That's a big shame. And then I think the last thing to mention is just Bowden Barrett and Dane McKenzie, both mentioned as 10s in the squad. So that's really interesting. But Lachie, that's all we got time for. Thank you so much for jumping on. Big wrap on the Lions, big look forward. It's been an absolute pleasure for this collaboration during the series.